The government has turned the attention back to climate change this week, today releasing this risk assessment of the impacts in a best and worst case scenario if action on climate change isn't taken. And also later in the week, we are expecting the government to lock in the new 2035 emissions reduction target. Joining me live now for a reaction is National Senator M.Canavan. Matt, thanks so much for your time. I'm sure you would have been sitting there with bated breath listening to every word Chris Bowen said, and he's put a lot of words out there in terms of these latest reports. Do you believe the dire prediction that's been laid out?
Look, I haven't watched Chris's press conference. I've started to read through the reports and look, my initial reaction is it's just a massive exercise in scaremongering. This is going to be the mother of all scare campaigns this week, trying to instill fear into Australians when there is no need for fear or panic on this. Look, I think it can be summed up the best by comparing two reports on climate change that have come out in the last few months. This report is full of flashy graphics, dramatic language, biblical type condemnation, damnation is going to come down this nation if you believe that report. Another report on climate change was released by the US government, the US Department of Energy, a few weeks ago. It's done by respected scientists. There is no flashy graphics. It's all just plain black and white text and some fairly nerdy graphs. And it's a very sober assessment that, yes, there are some risks, but it is nothing to panic about. And clearly, this government now is just a bunch of panic merchants trying to scare Australians to accept higher taxes, bigger government, and a poorer society. We'll be poorer thanks to the actions the government is proposing on climate change. And that is absolutely nonsensical, because even if you do believe the alarmist outcomes of this report, what is most important is that we have the wealthiest nation possible so we can mitigate any damage, whereas the government's policies are making us poorer. They've pushed up energy prices, they've closed down industries, and that's making us less able to respond to whatever the risks of climate change are.
But Matt, some of these big things that are being laid out today in this risk report, yes, there might be alarming headlines, but in terms of the substance of what's in there, do you acknowledge that there are potential real downsides for Australians, not just in the cities when we're talking about, and along our coastline when they talk about the impacts of flooding? What about, regional communities and farming, the impact if we do see the global temperature rise?
Well, as I say, there are some impacts of climate change. I think what's in this report is absolutely alarmist. Take the flooding, for example. I will at least recognise this report does finally state that the risk of cyclones is basically, risk of increase in cyclones, I should say, thanks to climate change, is basically zero. They say there's low confidence of and there's either no change or a small increase. And that's clear in the data. We've actually had fewer cyclones hitting Australia in recent years, in fact, over hundreds of years. And again, the alarmist headlines will tell you something completely different. This report also says there are going to be fewer extratropical lows. And so it's a bit hard to know. Most of our major flooding comes from cyclones and lows associated with those cyclones. With fewer of those, or the same number of those, how do we get all this extra flooding? Well, it seems to, and I'm still working through the report, but it seems to come from coastal flooding on sea level rise. Now, just to take that in context, historically Australia's had about, or in the recent decades, had about 1.6 millimetres a year in increases in sea levels. This report says that, or warns, is concerned in the upper estimates that we'd have 8 millimetres a year, a 6 times increase in sea level rise. It's pretty hard to take that at face value and think that's going to happen. I mean, please explain to me how that's going to happen. It's only if we've had climate change, apparently we're already living through it, but yet it's only growing at a level less than 2 millimetres a year. How would it go to 8 millimetres a year with just in a few years?
I wanted to put to you one of the central claims from Minister Chris Bowen today. He insists, and I quote him here, Matt, that the cost of inaction on climate change will always outweigh the cost of action. What's your reaction?
Well, absolutely absurd, because we know now the cost of action on this government's watch is costing us an arm and a leg. I mean, since the government committed us to net zero, electricity prices are up 40%, gas prices are up 40% in Australia. We've lost our nickel industry, we've lost our plastics industry, we've lost our urea industry. We're much, much poorer. And it's only going to get worse if we try and do it much, much more. That's the cost. That's the cost of action. Now the other problem here, of course, is that whatever we do is not going to change the risks, and the government doesn't tackle this issue at all. It's a serious issue. If the rest of the world is not acting, which they are not, clearly the actions we take are not going to deliver the benefits of the reduced risks that the government is highlighting today. Now, I think it's pretty silly to disconnect the consequences of a policy from whether or not you should do it. And so if we're going to take all this action and make ourselves poorer, restrict what we can do in this country, close down our manufacturing industry like what is happening, and then it doesn't actually avoid the flooding, I think bushfires, although it doesn't seem like they've gone hard with that, although I see some of the tiles and graphics on the newspaper websites have fires. That's a whole other issue. We haven't had more increased burned area in Australia either. So we've got all those issues. We've got all those things that we're saying we're going to avoid. But if we're not going to do that by acting alone and almost unilaterally, why would we do it? It makes no sense. I mean, America's pulling out of the Paris Agreement. China's building 2 coal-fired power stations a week. India's building massive amounts of coal-fired power stations. And even in Europe now, they're not really taking it seriously. They've got much bigger issues to tackle with their massive debt and war on their eastern front. So, look, what are we doing here as a nation? Making ourselves poorer, making ourselves less able to defend ourselves, and on top of that, less able to respond to the risks of climate change which do occur.
The next big fight on this is coming, it seems, later in the week when we're going to see the 2035 emissions reduction target locked in. It's a long time coming. We know that the Climate Change Authority has been consulting on a 65 to 75% reduction target. Do you think the coalition is going to come up with its own target, or would it be more wise to just spend your time criticising the government's one?
Look, I can't predict. I'm not going to be in the business of predicting what my colleagues do. I can tell you what I want them to do. I want them to scrap all of this. I think we should have one target in mind, and that's a cost of living target for Australians. We should have a target of bringing down prices, bringing down energy prices, creating more jobs for Australians. That should be our target. We should run our energy system with the one target in mind of producing the lowest possible energy prices for Australians. But we have now allowed a situation to emerge where the countries we export energy to, like Japan and Korea and China, are paying much less for electricity than we have to suffer through ourselves in this nation. I mean, how have we allowed that to emerge? What an absurd situation that we will send and export energy to another country to deliver them cheaper energy than we have access to ourselves. Now, that is the wages of the climate change policy. That is the result, the fruits, the bad fruits, the rotten fruits of this climate change net zero policies. It has delivered Australia energy uncompetitiveness. It is now shutting down industries and costing jobs, and it's clearly making our nation poorer. So that's the target I think we should focus on. This other stuff is, as I say, it's all a distraction. It's all meant to distract you from what they really want to do, which is to increase the size of government. I mean, that's the goal. That's their target. Their target is not to stop the impacts of climate change, because they can't do that. Their real goal behind the scenes is to increase the number of bureaucrats, increase the rules and regulations that all Australians have to comply with, and make for a bigger government but a smaller nation, a smaller economy as well.
Matt, does today's front page of The Australian, the news poll there, give you pause for thought that potentially the arguments you make are out of step with the majority of Australians, that for the coalition things are getting worse, not better, in this ongoing, internal debate about net zero within the coalition?
Yeah,
I know you have a very strong view on this, but is your view and the public
2 points
push against net zero harming Liberals in the city?
2 points about that. Well, I mean, number one, these low poll results, our shocking election results, have happened under a situation where we support net zero. I'm the one suggesting we change. I mean, clearly we should change things.
But would opposing that drastically change the polling?
Well, hang on. Let me answer your question. You've asked a question. Let me answer it. What we're currently doing is not working, and so we should change it. Now, I'm proposing a certain amount of change, some change. Those are saying we should just stick with what we've got. Well, that seems completely insane because it's not working. The second point to make is, we're losing votes to One Nation. That should be our first goal. One Nation in the Resolve poll and the other poll out today, they're actually bigger than the Greens. They're polling more than the Greens. They're the ones we're losing votes to right now. And so maybe we should, on that frame, we should think about what are we doing wrong that are forcing so many of our otherwise committed people who would support us to go to that party. And good luck to One Nation, but I don't want them to win. I'm obviously in the Liberal National Party. I think what we should be focused is on the issues that are clearly front and centre of the Australian people, which is the cost of living I mentioned earlier, and also the migration issue, which we haven't covered today. But if we get back to that core business, like just core business on making Australians' lives better, making our cities work better, making our homes more affordable for young people, that's what will get us back on track. If we focus on trying to solve global problems which we have no control over, we'll keep going down. We'll keep going the way we're going.
M.Canavan, a final prediction from you. Do you think in the end the coalition will abandon net zero as its target? I know you'd like that, but do you think that's where this will land?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I mean, we've just seen another party unit in Victoria over the weekend dump net zero. So Victoria State Council did that. So every mainland state has a Liberal and National Party unit that's abandoned support for net zero. I mean, going back to the question, I mean, I suppose I think we will because, look, I don't see how you allow a situation to continue where our party members, the people who support us, people who come out and hand out for us and are at the front lines of election battle with us, have fundamentally and almost universally, almost most of these motions are going through without very little dissent, almost universally are against this net zero crazy big government agenda. How are we going to win elections if the parliamentary party has a policy so diametrically opposed to the core membership of the party? I mean, those things don't compute. It just doesn't work. We are a grassroots party. We're at our best when we're in line with our grassroots, and that's our biggest advantage over the hierarchical, big union, big corporate, big business supported Labor Party. Our best skill, our best asset is harnessing the thousands of people, small businesses who want to see more freedom in this country, a smaller government, more opportunity for their children. We've got to harness them to win. And we've obviously been failing at that and will continue to fail if we find ourselves so different at the opposite ends of a debate than their heartfelt views are.
National Senator M.Canavan, always appreciate your time here on Sky News. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Queensland's Attorney General has apologised to the families of two police officers and a